Hello there, and welcome to a new series on the Terran Empire from Star Trek. In this episode, we are going to be focusing on the timeline of the Terran Empire that we can confirm, so we will only be including the timeline as seen on screen. We won't be including any expanded universe content such as Star Trek Online, or books or comic books or other media. In 2155, Commander Jonathan Archer would describe the Empire as having existed for centuries. The precise origins are unclear, but there are hints of some form of continuation of the Roman Empire, either as a state or perhaps as a cultural legacy, with the Empire having an emperor with the Roman style of intrigue and treachery that was commonplace in that empire, as well as Kirk being mentioned as becoming a Caesar, and the more blatant use of the word Terran, which derives from the Latin word terra, meaning earth. We see in Enterprise that the current incarnation of the Empire existed in some form, certainly by the 20th century, with the Terran Empire, not the United States of America, planting its flag on the moon. By the post-Third World War era of 2363, Terrans would make their first contact with a non-terrestrial species, after they would achieve warp capability. The Terrans would then go on to murder the aliens and steal their ship and all of its technology, and we can infer that using that they would unify Earth and then go on to expand the Terran Empire beyond the borders of the Sol system. By the mid-22nd century, the Empire had grown to encompass Vulcan, Denobula, Andoria and others, but was perhaps overextended and would face a serious rebellion in the mid-2150s, a conflict the Terrans were in danger of losing. Their fortunes would, however, change with the arrival of a vessel from an alternate reality and time, the USS Defiant, a ship and technology that would be used to put down the rebellion and firmly secure the Terran Empire. We see that in this phase of the Empire, the Terrans were already more widespread and had explored, or perhaps conquered, more territory than the United Earth, as humans had already encountered species such as the Gorn. It's also reasonable to assume that Imperial Starfleet warships' offensive and defensive capabilities were superior to the United Earth and Starfleet's ships' offensive and defensive capabilities, based on how easily the Terran warship, the ISS Enterprise, was so easily able to deal with a Tholian warship, with Reed even laughing at the fact that they were bothering to charge their weapons, versus how the Enterprise of the Prime Universe was quite easily overwhelmed by the same species. This is, of course, assuming that the Tholians of both universes are comparable technologically. At this time, as could be commonplace, an ambitious officer made a grab for power, taking advantage of the superior firepower and technology of the USS Defiant and the weakened position of the Terran Empire to attempt to take power for himself. But as is also fairly common in the Terran culture, there's always someone else with a knife at your back while you hold one at someone else's throat, and he would be betrayed and another officer would take power for herself, becoming Empress. At least from what we can tell, she becomes Empress. There's not a lot of concrete canon information as to what happens with the Empire for the next 100 years or so. We do know that the Empire does continue to expand and conquer based on information such as Intendant Kira mentioning the conquest of Bajor by the Terrans, and certainly the Terrans encountered the Cardassians considerably earlier than the United Federation of Planets would encounter them. It's also reasonable that the Empire was much larger than the Federation at the same time period in the 23rd century due to the fact that they had neutralized the Klingon Empire, and based on conversations with Emperor Shoujo in Discovery, the Empire had explored or again conquered beyond the known territorial borders of the Federation. By the late 23rd century, what we can establish of the Empire is it was at its height of its powers. During the incident with the crossover event between the command crews of the USS Enterprise and the ISS Enterprise, we can establish that the Empire and the Federation clearly had very different ways of dealing with the situation, with both parties attempting to negotiate access to resources on a planet that's currently inhabited. The inhabitants say no to the Federation, they accept this and move on. The Terrans are told no, and their solution would be to bombard the planet into submission and likely conquer it, if not exterminate its entire population. We also know that around this time period, the Terran Empire had expanded into regions inhabited by the Cardassians and the Bajorans, having conquered Bajor somewhere around this time. However, the consequences of the crossover event with Kirk would be the influence he would have upon Commander Spock of the Mirror Universe. And this man would go on to institute changes within the Empire and reforms that would ultimately lead to its downfall by creating a much more pacifistic version of Starfleet, likely removing the more aggressive officers and replacing them with more moderates, not realizing that the Terrans had made so many enemies in the forms of the Klingons, the Cardassians, and likely countless others, who would take opportunity of the Terrans' weakness to remove them as a threat and elevate their own powers, ultimately forming the Alliance as it become known. Not much is known about what happened exactly in the aftermath of this. We do know that Spock rose to power and made the Empire more pacifistic, and that it would ultimately be conquered. What exactly happened to the Terrans over the next 100 years is a little vague. We know they were enslaved, but although likely Starfleet was disbanded or destroyed, it did in some form survive, as established in episodes of Deep Space Nine, where you see the Terrans utilizing craft such as the Peregrine-class attack ships that could only have been built by Terrans. So there was some form of continuation, except it was never really elaborated on the screen, and as a result you're looking to beta cannons filling the gaps, which is not what we're exploring in this video. Well, thank you. I hope you enjoyed this video. I will be doing more videos on the Terrans in the future, where I will explore some of the beta canon, such as the books and Star Trek Online. But for now, we're done, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.